But if you want to have a thriving marriage, I have come to learn that that is the best way to get there. Alright friends, today we're going to dive into a topic that I don't often touch upon. I don't often make videos surrounding men, relationships, marriage very often, and I thought that today would be a good opportunity to bring back up that topic, to revitalize it on my channel. A couple days ago, I did venture off in a certain sector of the internet where they talk about similar topics that I do on this channel, but in reference to masculinity. Now, what I'm interested in as a wife, as a woman, are the videos that had other women on there talking about their experiences in relationships in their 20s as well as their 30s that they wanted to progress into marriage. The truth is that if you are a millennial or a Gen Z, you do not grow up in a society or in a culture in North America that prepares you adequately for marriage. You might have been blessed with the opportunity to see a good marriage or a positive traditional marriage in your own household, but many of us didn't care to ask the questions that are important to prepare for marriage or to even take notice about how the dynamic worked. That being said, a majority of women still do want to get married, and when they reach a point where they achieve their goal in getting married, unfortunately, they are not prepared to have a thriving one. Although I wouldn't have necessarily considered myself a horrible wife when I first got married at the age of 22, I definitely was in that position where I was a little bit rough around the edges in terms of knowing what to do to make a successful marriage work. You might have already heard some sounds in the background, and that is my son, and he's my little sidekick in the videos that I've been making lately. My videos are not extensive because I do have a short amount of time. I of course don't want to leave him in his swing or his bouncer or his chair for a very long period of time, but it gives me a good opportunity to really hone in on the points that I think are the most important, or create introductory videos where I can get your feedback. By the way, leave a comment down below, and your likes, so that I can know what to dive deeper into in the future. So the first point we have to talk about, which is a little bit what I discussed a couple minutes ago, which is the fact that many people don't pass on marriage wisdom in our society. A lot of times, those of us who create videos in this niche get criticized for not necessarily living a truly traditional lifestyle. But you have to understand that when we talk about living a traditional lifestyle, we talk about trying to preserve values about the things that worked, the family dynamics that created thriving and productive individuals, values that steered people away from too much consumerism, those kinds of things. Because none of us can really live a truly traditional lifestyle because we live in a modern era. However, we can try to focus on the most important values from the past and learn from our ancestors in trying to cultivate what was the most successful. So considering this, one of the things that jumps out in my mind in terms of womanhood in today's society is the kind of over-celebration of women. I think that we need to see a variety of women. We need to celebrate women for what makes us unique. However, in trying to do that and have more female representation in a culture, we have to a certain extent over-glorified women. And what I mean by that is that many of us grow up thinking that just because we are women, we can do no wrong. I also mentioned in the video that I just made that many of us grew up with participation trophies. We were simply praised for just showing up. And although that is positive to a certain extent, simply showing up in marriage isn't going to make a good one. I think where many women in my generation fall short is that they don't understand the difference between constructive criticism and an insult. Feedback doesn't mean that you are getting critiqued as a person. And this is important because when you have conversations with your spouse, you want to be open to how you can change. You also don't want your spouse to be walking on eggshells around you, feeling as though they can't give you any feedback. My husband is extremely chivalrous, and honestly, in my opinion, he gives me the world. But that doesn't mean that I'm worthy of receiving the world just because I am a woman and just because he loves me. He's going to do it either way, but it really helps to think about how you can actually bring value to your husband's life. Just being a presence in his life, although he loves you like I just mentioned and he wants you to be there, isn't the best way to mutually give to each other in a marriage. This can even range from practical things to deeper elements, which segues into my next point, where you have to actually ask men what they want in a relationship. relationship. Men cannot read your mind, and that definitely piggybacks off of the first point, where I do think that in modern culture, many women expect men to understand them. However, if you're familiar with the content on my channel, you know that men and women are on average different. People like to point out the exceptions, but we are talking about the average, the majority here. If you want to go out on a date to a particular restaurant, you can't just assume that he's going to know that you want to do that and then give him attitude because he didn't read your mind that you wanted to do that. Likewise, ask him what his preferences are and give him that space to genuinely give you that feedback. A lot of men are very afraid of telling women what they want and what they expect in a relationship because they don't want to get that attitude backlash. But if you want to have a thriving marriage, I have come to learn that that is the best way to get there, because you know exactly what that person expects of you. And in having that communication, you can come to a compromise on certain points if you have to. Now, of course, this goes even deeper in terms of intimacy, feelings, how you speak to one another. But like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, every relationship is different. So take what I just said and tailor it to all aspects of your relationship. All right, so the next thing that I want to talk to you about that I discovered early on is that men need male spaces to thrive. I have noticed in today's culture that many women get upset when their husbands have hobbies or other male friends because they feel as though when you get married, you're supposed to replace that. And although you and your husband could consider each other best friends, it's important for him to have hobbies or friends that appeal to his male interests because you and him are not entirely the same. Just like I've said, I've noticed on TikTok particularly, I'm always talking about TikTok because it's a good reflection of where society is today and what a majority of people view as important, that when husbands aren't doing exactly what the wife wants to do in the evenings, for example, that they get labeled as men who simply don't care. But also adding on to one of my first points, you have to tell your husband exactly what you want. If you want to spend a date night with him, tell him that. But also, it's important to respect his space. Maybe he does have a hobby or a men's group that he wants to be a part of. Instead of brushing it off and feeling as though he puts that as precedence over what you want to do for an activity, the simplest solution is to create a schedule that you can respect each other's time. It's important not to feel as though you are at each other's beck and call. It's also very important for those of you who have a vested interest in a more traditional masculine and feminine marriage, because it's going to help you be in environments that will create that energy so that when you come together, you are better able to show up for each other. All right, so I do recognize that this video is quite short and there are so many more things that I could say, and I encourage you to leave comments down below adding on what you think is important. I could definitely dive deeper into each point, into more points, but as I stated at the beginning, this is more so of an introductory video to try to get this content out there to revitalize this playlist, because I don't think I've made a video on relationships in particular since probably 2020 or 2019. So there's a lot, as somebody who has been married for a couple of years in a more traditionally structured marriage, that I could put out there. So like the video if you'd like for me to make more content like this. I'll see you next time, lovely feminine friends. Bye-bye.